Hello guys, welcome back to Potlands War. And did you ever ask question, how realistic is command and control elements in wargaming? I sometimes do. And my friend Dalibor Zeman, which you will probably know if you are a Napoleonic wargamer for many of his articles about Russian army during Napoleonic Wars, asked this question to Jakub Smek, who is one of the leading members of the Central European Napoleonic Society and co-organizer of Battle of Austerlitz. So, to be honest, in the contemporary nomenclature, one could say he is a security analyst of Napoleonic era. So Dalibor asked him a couple of these command and control questions in wargaming context, and how are they realistic or not realistic in the context of the actual Napoleonic warfare. Well, it ended up as article on Dalibor's blog, Wargaming Against Serious Way. I will put the link in the description, which was originally in Czech, and I asked him if he could translate it, and I made it to the video to get it into wider audience, because I think it's a really interesting piece which is worth of reading or listening if you are watching the video right now. It's sort of conversation, so I hope you will get the concept of the video. I was thinking about some rap writing or something like that, but I was afraid that I would sort of kill something which would be lost in translation or stuff like that. So it's actually still just an interview with question and answers from Jakub. So let's get started. Answer from redaction. Our conversation should help to get a feel for some of the mechanics that wargaming games brings to the table and compare them to the real-world application of the Napoleonic battlefield. Unlike the Kriegspiel stuff games of the past, wargaming is mostly played without a referee according to a template defined by the mechanics. Historical games, then, tend to be primarily simulation-based games that attempt to place decision-making process appropriate to the period in front of the player in the position of the commanding officer. Of course, with the understanding the commanding officer has a god mode. That is, he knows the rules, he knows the battlefield, and he can see the enemy. To keep the game from being monotonous, the roll of the dice is here. Close service friction or fog of war comes into play by increasing the influence of randomization of the game. And the most common way is to limit the ability of the chain of command to control subordinate units. Various forms of non-linear unit activation are typical example. For me, this is probably the hardest mechanic to grasp. When I get to roll wrong, my brigade forgets that just 13 minutes ago, games usually have a land and time scale, it was marching to Prate's heights, even though it's still following the same orders. To paraphrase the director of one bad movie about Napoleon, it's just a game, and none of us were there. But let's get to our questions. How were the general orders formulated before the battle, and to what depth did they go? To the battalion commanders or to the individual lieutenants? Is there a redundancy in the process of transmitting orders? How does the chain of command actually work? Jakub answers. The basic tactical unit of infantry is the battalion. For cavalry is more like a regiment, but it depends a lot on the situation. For artillery, if we disregard the battalion guns, it's a division or battery. I am not going to go into terminology here, but sometimes it sticks. A division of artillery is made up, in France, of artillery company and company or half company of artillery. The word battery already refers to battle formation of this division. A lieutenant is at all events entirely outside what is called chain of command. If we take it from the bottom up in infantry, we have the chief of battalion, above him a general of brigade, colonel and infantry regiment come into play only in specific situation, above him a general of division and a corps commander. With cavalry, in France the chief of squadron commands 2 squadrons, and these are still very much tactical sub-units of the regiment. So there we have a chain of more of colonel, to brigadier, to divisional general, or directly above the brigadier general to the corps commander if the corps cavalry forms only brigade or weak division. The artillery is even different. The artillery commander at the general staff level does not interfere in the performance on the battlefield, with specific exceptions. The divisional artillery is disposed of the divisional general, the corps reserved by corps commander. Battalion pieces are mechanically subject to the chief of battalion. The order is issued before the battle by the commander-in-chief of the form of some general disposition is addressed to the corps commanders. And it is then their responsibility, in which naturally the commander-in-chief might interfere, to carry on their situation, their space, their time, and with the means they have. If, for example, at Austerlitz, Napoleon stipulates before the battle that the maneuver of the day will be, to quote, to march forward in echelons with the right wing in advance, end of quote. He need add no more details for the battle formation of the corps concert. Yeah, the 4th and the 5th is for them it's obvious and given. And so is the internal structure of various divisions. Specifically, the 5th Corps, he says, to quote, Marshal Lanz will see that the division of Suchet and Caffarelli are always behind the hill, and that the enemy cannot see them. End of quote. Caffarelli is the 1st division, Suchet is the 3rd division. That is, Suchet stands on the left, Caffarelli on the right, but it's unnecessary to say so. They automatically maneuver all the time, and they also pass the night that the way before the battle. These are the orders that the commander-in-chief may give: a general sense of movement, general direction, starting positions, time, or he may emphasize, as in the case of Lan, some requirements depending on the terrain. Neither the chief of battalion nor the brigadier general needs to know any of this, though a general awareness of the overall sense of the maneuver might help them, and is useful if they, especially the brigadier general, get temporarily bumped up a level because of casualties or other influences. The corps commander then issues his own orders to the division commanders, and for brigades and battalion it's essentially a follow me with the division general and his staff and aides handling the details. The order of unit is given, unless otherwise specifies, the formation is determined. There is nothing not to understand. The more junior rank, the more mechanical and without room for any initiative or decision. I understand that when you see everything on the game board, chance is introduced with some roll of the dice into the process of war, and I have absolutely no idea how to make it work well. But one thing is certain: senior officers and generals are not robots, and when they get out of the range of their superior and into unusual situations, they naturally react. They have limitations imposed by what they know about the intent of their superiors, what they know about the wider area, what they know about the movement of their own and the enemy troops. The corps commander naturally has a better grasp of this than the brigadier general, because the brigadier general job is, up to now, has been to ensure that the orders from above are carried out, to oversee order in his own formation, and his attention is focused on the tactical situation in the brigade's area of deployment. He does not devote himself to recognize reports and does not receive information from general staff. He had no reason to study the map in depth. His situational awareness is different from that on the divisional level. Even less so chief of the battalion, whose main attention is focused on his direct subordinates and the mechanical subunits he forms and sets in motion mechanically, the execution of which he is directly responsible for. On the other hand, I can imagine a wounded divisional commander disappearing from the scene, being replaced from elsewhere or by the selected brigade commander, and the formation falters. It does not know if it's already sufficiently forward. It does know from where it can expect the enemy. The options and possibilities and combinations of options are innumerable. Alternatively, the situation changes. A good example is the rear of Langeron column in the Pratzenberg. The last unit had already seen the French heading for the top, but there were no one with enough authority, insight, and decisiveness to stop and turn the last brigade. By the time a report came to the head of the column, to the commander, and by the time he decided to change to advance, it was too late. So another question. Imagine a situation where you are a corps commander commanding 3 brigades, 2 infantry, 1 cavalry, and some artillery reserve. You have been ordered to take Utica Kurgan, You reach the battlefield and you are in some sort of starting positions. Editor's note: we are talking about the terms from the games where the organization and nomenclature is adapted a bit to the mechanics. A large number of games work with you commanding brigades or divisions, even if it's not the historically accurate terminology for organization. So, how quickly was an officer able to react at the brigade, corps, or army corps level the moment he discovered that the subordinate officer was not following orders? And Jakub answers again: I don't know if that can be answered in general way. What orders would subordinate not follow? There could be a zillion reasons. Didn't he form his battalion as directed? Didn't he have enough room to do it? Didn't have enough time? Did the enemy get in the way? A superior can react as quickly as the horse and distance will allow him or his ADC. And of course, and we see this in our funny battles in reenactment, the situation that a commander sees and assesses from his position will be different the moment he makes a decision, different the moment the order is transmitted, and different the moment it's carried out. They are all things that need to be accounted for. It makes little sense, for example, to send IDECAM to the commander of brigade threatened by cavalry charge to form a square, unless it is somehow obvious that he is unaware of it. He should be able to assess such situation in standard way and take some action on his own. That is what he is there for, but the point is to estimate further development and send reinforcements to arrive at the threatened section and help to resolve the situation that arises and which cannot be prevented. Another question. In a Napoleon case, the battle orders were quite detailed. But as you write in your article about the mixed formations, the corps commanders execute them in their own way anyway. The individual column commanders ignore these super orders as well. They make decisions independently so that the objective is met. Or is the other way around a more rigid literal solution and the attacks at the Parates heights being an exception? Jakub again answers. You are referring to the gradual evolution of opinions about the appropriate formation of the main strike force at Austerlitz, I guess. The main thing can you see that is that the Napoleon didn't underestimate his dimension of that matter. He had his own opinion on it, and at the time he wasn't the most skilled practitioner of this regard, but he was able to take advice. In 1805, to his credit, he still was. It cannot be said the corps commanders were doing it their own way, but they had convinced him that the theoretical advantages of complex systems could very easily turn against their own in battlefield practices. Complicated those early considerations were, above all, because they tied the hands of division and brigade generals too tightly. The antithesis of appropriate course of action is best seen at Waterloo, where Napoleon ordered, or authorized the ordering, in any case for which he bears responsibility, the formation of massive columns within which the divisional and brigadier generals no longer had any freedom of maneuver or reaction to those situations whatsoever. The appropriate way is to form the infantry so that not only the corps but the divisions and brigades can maneuver at any moment in any direction. With Napoleon and some of his subordinates, we gradually see a certain resignation in this direction, which culminates symbolically at the Waterloo. This turning point comes after 1809. Independent decision making at all levels of command is not a value in itself. The subordinate must always have a view, the more general assignment which determines its direction and aim. And the superior, with his insight in all directions and his theoretically greater experience, can interfere in very minute details without indulging in harmful micromanagement. The essential and salutary thing is when within the chain of command, officers know each other, have marched together for a long time, have maneuvered together, know their capabilities, and can gauge their procedures. Then they ideally complement each other. The less this works, the more rigid it is. While if corps commanders are to be expected to take the initiative and have a great deal of freedom of decision, divisional generals are already more bound by their commander's more detailed intent, and at the brigade level there is even less room for this. The battalion is then by default just a tool, if we are talking about regular field battle. And there are a number of wise sayings on this. For example, Juvion Saint-Cyr said, "The moment the subordinates cannot do all that is required of them, they begin to do only what they themselves want to do. And this is another only reason why we should never, in framing an order, leave an officer or whatever rank the choice of what he is to execute. We may be almost sure that he will give preference not to what will be advantageous to the service in general, but what he finds in the interest of his own or his unit or his own, or at least to what will be the easiest." End of quote. Of course, we are not talking about the mechanics of small tactics on the battlefield here. It's more general problem. Even in the context of deploying a force of ours on the battlefield against the enemy, it is certainly desirable that subordinates know exactly what their superior expects of them, and that is it within their power to carry it out. That a subordinate commander would go on the offensive in formation other than he decide one, unless he didn't understand and there was no time to correct him. Another question. It is realistic for it to happen that one of your brigades goes on offensive, but because I made a bad roll, yeah, the adjutant did not arrive with the order, or mistook the transmitted order, or can read it after Napoleon, the other brigade is left standing in the boarding area because it doesn't know what to do? Good answers? It can certainly happen. So, of course, the brigade is left standing is a problem that can be solved quite easily and quickly. The bigger problem is when the brigade moves forward when it shouldn't have. That, by the way, was probably one of the reasons for the disastrous employment of the French cavalry at Waterloo. Because once, especially, but not only, cavalry moves, stopping can be already a difficult problem. Delays are part of the thing. It's hardly so mechanical that brigades that are part of the same formation doesn't respond to order given. You can imagine, for example, that they stall while passing through a village to deployment area because another formation crosses their path, etc. But not every commander is zealous and conscientious. He may take his time for a number of reasons, but that a battle line should be commanded forward and one of the brigades should fail to respond, I cannot imagine it. Mishearing, misunderstanding, confusion within minutes and hundreds of yards. Generally, on these things, unit executes unless otherwise directed. Would they see their neighbors execute towards the commander's positions, usually the center? The aforementioned infantry regulations of August 1st, 1791, say in introduction to the evolutions of the line, which for the sake of example are the maneuver of division of 8 battalions, to quote, "In case the chief of battalion did not hear the general command, but saw battalion directly adjacent to him execute a movement, he would immediately have the same movement executed by his battalion, and the same between the admittedly very checkered tree of possibilities. It enters this position also applies to brigade or divisions, although the maneuver is usually much less mechanical." Another questions. This can be followed by what happens where the order arrives, but the situation on the battlefield has changed, so that the order is now obsolete and unrealistic. Is the commander able to respond flexibly to the changing situation? Answer. The lower down the chain of command, the more flexible within my situation. If there is an opportunity not to get shot at from the side, I will automatically take it, of course. I've mentioned this problem here before, that changing the situation over time and the need to anticipate what is going to happen when my orders are yet to be transmitted and carried out. I guess we would have to talk about those specific circumstances. However, in principle it's the same at all levels, and certainly responding to a changing situation is necessary and part of the point. Mouton was ordered at Waterloo to deploy to the second line behind the Elon, but because the Prussians were pushing into his right flank, he turned his corps 90 degrees to the east. At Austerlitz, Major Bigir marched with both battalions of the 4th Regiment on the Old Vineyards in a sunset direction, but the Russian Guards cavalry came charging towards him from over the horizon. He really did not need to wait for an order from the brigade or division commander to form a square. Another answer. Another question. From my point of view, a lot of Wargaming games substitutes confused orders. Grucci at Waterloo, the Erlon at Quaterbros, Ligny, Ni at Bausen, Juno at Valitona Gora, that take place outside, say the line of engagement, but sometimes in the rear with the possibility of misunderstanding the order when you already showering lead on each other. How capable were infantry or cavalry commanders at battalion or squadron level of independently develop combat action within the framework of synergy, situational awareness, or intent we discussed earlier? That is, how realistic is that the battalion forgets what he is supposed to do, or that the cavalry will forget that they are on battlefield and their only interest will be to return to the deployment area or back to its allies? And Jakub answers. Absolutely minimal. Nothing like that is either desirable or sustainable in the long term. If a chief of battalion has to deal with his tactical situation, he is indeed a last resort. His focus, as I said, is primarily on his own formation, controlling it, directing it, determining its method of fire, and checking that everything is done properly and reliably. He doesn't have much time to observe and comprehensively assess his tactical situations. That's what his brigadier general is there for. If the enemy appears on the left flank of the battalion and starts shooting at me, my solution of turning the battalion's front to his direction or attaching several pelotons might not be appropriate, sufficient, desirable. The general might want to send a battalion in from the second line. Or he may perceive, rather than I, that there is a disproportionately greater problem in my current direction, and this enemy action are just a diversion, etc., etc. If I have no general present and effectively commanding over me, I have no choice but to react as I do judge for myself with all the risk that entails. It is probably important to perceive the diversity of the situations we are discussing. In other situations, you have a light infantry battalion commander who is doing some reconnaissance or other tasks somewhere in front of the army. In other situations, you have the line infantry battalion chief who is part of a standard battle line during some general battle. Forget what to do can be illustrated again by example of Slavkov, by the way. Not at all levels of battalion or brigade, but directly at the level of two army corps. In front of Murat and Lens, Bagration retreated while according to Napoleon battle plan he should not have been fought at all because Napoleon did not foresee his presence here. They did engage, they succeed, though not substantially. Then clash head on and had more forces, they were better disposed. But they stopped. Napoleon paid attention to the southern section of the battlefield. He did not look north, and in fact, he did not care what was happening here. And so his two divisions of infantry and practically the entire cavalry reserve stopped. They did not pursue the retreating Bagration. Murat was in supreme command here. He alone did not decide on the next advance. He did not receive orders from Napoleon, he did not actively solicit them himself, and in his report he contented himself with indication that he would have taken the heights of Rauschnitz and Austerlitz, but as there was still fighting on the right he thought it be necessary to keep the troops ready and secure the occupied area of the Olmutz road. Be that as it may, Bagration retreated peacefully as a result. If Murat had stuck to Napoleon's original plan, he would have headed for the Prates Heights after his unexpected engagement with Bagration, but he would have arrived too late and would have been no good here. So, in conclusion, then we can say that commanders at all levels should be able to conduct maneuvers independently, to conduct combat independently in accordance with the overall plan, but it depends on the abilities of individual commanders. And last, Jakub answers, they certainly technically can. Their hands are mostly tied by their reduced situational awareness, but mainly the commanders of the basic tactical units should not be put into situations where they have to react independently. Simply put, the brigadier general is tank commander, the battalion chief is the driver and gunner. And in fact, one should even say that if the battalion chief is the gunner and the driver, the captains and lieutenants are the loader and the gearbox. But here too, it depends on the situation. If we deploy the peloton in loose formations out of the close coordination with the battalion in the open field, then the captain is in the position of commander of the basic tactical unit, and depending on the task, he must also often be very flexible in adapting to the situation. Because light infantry is more frequently deployed this way, its officers have more experience, and this in turn translates in relatively greater effectiveness of this weapon in such situations. And that's it. That's the interview with Jakub. I hope you enjoyed it, and I think it's really informative. So I sort of need to, bring it to the wider audience. I want to say that I am not French speaker, so there could be some pronunciations problems, and also I'm not native English speaker, which you probably observed by yourself. So I apologize if it tears your ears. And I want to again say thank you to Jakub for his answers and Dalibor for making the interview, and also thank them both together to they allow me to make the video version of it. And if you are watching this video on YouTube and you saw some ads, I promise Dalibor that I will give him half of the revenue so he can go and buy some more beers for him and Jakub and make part 2 of this interview. So if you want part 2, watch the video so I have lots of ad revenue so I can give them money for many beers. But anyway, if you like the video, click the like button, write some comments about it. I'm sure that Dalibor would love to see them, that you enjoyed the interview and his work is appreciated. And don't forget to also hit the subscribe button, because when the part 2 will be released, you don't miss it. So this was Pop on War with guests from Wargaming against Serious Play. As I said earlier, I will put the blog link in the description, and you hopefully enjoyed it, and see you in the next one. Bye guys.